Welcome to the Shunned podcast, where we expose religions that use shunning as a tool to control people. I'm going to jump right into our interview today, but stick around after for two really cool announcements. One about me coming to New York City to speak at a conference, and there's a meetup actually that I'm going to organize the day after if you'd like to meet me. So I know I'd love to meet you, and I hope that any who are in the New York City area might be up for a meetup. So let's go ahead and jump in. Today we're going to meet Corrie. Her son Nico was featured back in April on episode 29. Now we get to hear her story, and she does a really good job of putting it all together, and she was a lot of fun to talk to. She became one of Jehovah's Witnesses in her early 30s after a guy that was doing some tree work at her house pitched her and introduced her to his wife for a Bible study. Having recently lost her grandmother and in the middle of grieving, they gave her a hope that she could cling to, and that kind of drew her in. This is a story of manipulation from the beginning up until the end of her time in the cult. You'll find out how therapy and Leah Remini helped wake her up, and we have some great conversation about finding oneself after leaving. So let's go ahead and meet Corrie.
Hi, my name is Corey. I am an ex-Jehovah's Witness. I am 41 years old, and I am shunned.
All right, Corey. So how did you come to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses in the first place? What age were you?
I was, I believe, 33. I had just bought my first home for my family, and I had a gentleman come to my home to do some tree work. And in the midst of just very random conversation, he had said something about the times that we're living in. And I said, yeah, something along the lines of, this world is just getting worse. And he, picked my brain. Well, why do you think that? And then he said, well, hold on one second. I'll be right back. And he ran to his work truck and he came back with a Bible. And so that's how it kind of started,
Wow.
Just piquing my interest. And I thought it was completely crazy that this guy went and got a Bible out of his car. I was like, what is going on? But the more questions I asked, he seemed to just have all of the perfect answers. And so from there, he, said, I want you to introduce you to my wife. She's in the same field as you because we're in the medical field. And I think you guys will hit it off and maybe even start a Bible study. And I said, oh, no, I never want to become a Jehovah's Witness, and he goes, no, it's just about you learning how to, maneuver through your Bible and understand it and stuff. And that's our goal, is just to get you to open up your own Bible. And I said, oh, so I can study off of my grandmother's Bible. He said, absolutely. And so his wife came over. And of course, we had so many, common things as far as being a wife and a mother and in the medical field and things like that. So we hit it off right away.
So
That's how it began.
Yeah, so let me ask you, 33 is a little later in life than a lot of the people. In fact, I'd say that I may be wrong, but I think that's about the oldest that I've interviewed so far as when someone was introduced to the witnesses. So prior to that, were you a particularly religious person, or kind of where were you when that came into your life?
Okay. Well, I've never been a very religious person. I always considered myself more of a spiritual person.
Mm-hmm.
I always found myself talking to God, intrigued about why things existed, what our purpose was, those types of things.
Mm-hmm.
My family was Catholic, but always I guess my grandmother was Catholic, so everybody else assumed they were Catholic.
By default.
So yeah, just by default. But I think the reason that this intrigued me was one of the things that she had said early on in our conversation. We were talking about death, and she shared with me the scripture in Revelation. And I thought, oh my gosh, I had just lost my grandmother. We literally had to uproot our entire family to buy this new home because my grandmother lived with us for 2 years before she passed away of cancer. And so I was really, really grieving. I never considered myself a religious person, but I held my family very, very close to me. And when she died, I was lost. And so when they gave me that hope of being able to see her again, that was everything.
Yeah, there's a certain amount of vulnerability there when you're in the middle of grieving someone that you really miss and loved, And I mean, Jehovah's Witnesses have a great sales pitch. I mean, let's face it, you can live forever on this beautiful earth, and you can see all your dead loved ones and see them, back here on the earth. I think sometimes the view of heaven, that's something that we can't really grasp, but we know what the earth looks like. And so I think that it's a really good message as far as being something that's appealing to people. I can see how it really would have been appealing to you at that time.
Yeah, and I was going through struggling with a very unhappy marriage and, trying to maneuver through that. And so I think that the two key points is death of a loved one and a happy family life, and who doesn't want that? So
Right.
it was really easy for my interest to be piqued early on. So that's how it all began.
So how did you feel? So, you start studying with them. Obviously, there's going to become a point where it's time for Corey to start attending meetings.
hmm
So, as an adult attending your first meetings, how did you feel? What was your kind of the vibe that you got from all of that?
My first meeting, I felt almost like I was in a trance. Like I walked into this building. To me, it was very plain. There wasn't any pictures on the wall. There was no idols, all of the things, growing up Catholic that I remember of being in a church. And so I felt like I was um, almost like a classroom setting. But I had all of these strangers coming up to me and greeting me and telling me how happy they were there, that I was there. And to me, I thought, wow, these people are just very genuine and so loving. And I felt really supported. So my first meeting, even though I was kind of standoffish, like, why are these people hugging me? And why do they look so happy? I didn't really get a sense that it was inauthentic. Like I thought, wow, these people are really genuinely happy that me and my family are here. And so it made me feel welcomed and it made me feel like really good. You don't get that a lot of times in other situations. So to get that was just a really overjoyed experience.
Yeah, I can
And it just
imagine.
made me and my kids feel very welcome.
Yeah, I can only imagine how that must have felt. You hear the term love bombing, and it is a true statement. It's the term when you first come into a place like that. I mean, heck, even as one of Jehovah's Witnesses, I remember going and visiting congregations that were maybe more rural, where I had some friends, and walking in there, and everybody just so interested in you and hoping that maybe you were going to move down there to where they lived or something like that. And
hmm
it does come across as this very genuine interest, even though sometimes, I mean, I don't know how it was for you, but for me, it ended up being kind of short lived in some of those situations. But so for you, you're getting this love, and you're starting to attend meetings. How does that progress for you? Because I know, like you had told them from the beginning, look, I don't want to be one of Jehovah's Witnesses, but we all know that that you ended up there. So how did you get there from that point?
Well, okay, so I have to take you back a little bit.
Okay.
Um, when I first started studying, I was studying by myself. My husband at the time wanted nothing to do with it. The minute he heard that the kids weren't going to have Christmas, he completely shut down and wanted nothing to do with it, to the point where he would literally go lock himself in the bedroom while I had my studies with this woman, Dorothy. He wanted no part of it. And about 6 months in, slowly but surely, he would come out and get a cup of coffee. He would, you could tell he was eavesdropping. But of course, I was programmed by this woman to say, well, it's through you, it's through your conduct that's going to bring him in. And so I always felt like I was under the microscope. So I had to keep, this facade of like really interested and making sure that I was responding to all of her questions, especially when I knew he was in the kitchen, because I wanted him to join me. And so fast forward us studying maybe about 7 months, then all of a sudden he started studying. And so it became a couple study with her husband, and me and my husband. And we were studying for, all in all, we studied for about 3.5 years before we were ever baptized. It took
Wow.
us 2.5 years to even step foot into a kingdom hall. So it was a long process for us. In the midst of that, this is a very touchy subject, but in the midst of this, us studying, and I felt like our family was coming together, and now my boys were studying with her son, and so I felt like there was such a progression, like, you know, our bond of marriage and the happy family life, like it was all coming to terms, until I came home one day in December and a bombshell was dropped on me that my husband was actually sleeping with our neighbor.
Oh, wow.
And so, of course, during that vulnerable time, I was humiliated. And so I didn't want to call family. So the first person I called was Dorothy, the one I was studying with. And I was devastated. And I said, I took my kids to a hotel and I don't know what I'm going to do. And that was the first time that, now I look back, that was the first time that I was completely manipulated, besides the fact of coming into the organization. Because the thing that she told me was, do you really believe that your husband could do that? And I said, yes, I have proof. And I was crying. And she goes, no. She said, Corey, you have to understand something. When you start coming into Jehovah's organization and you start serving him whole souled, that is when Satan comes in and he throws tactics and he just wants your family out of the organization. So this is the time where you need to show your faith and show that you trust in Jehovah, and you need to keep your family together.
Oh, wow.
And so now I'm completely devastated. I have my children in a hotel room. I am completely besides myself because I had never suspected that this would happen. And now I have this guilt eating me up because I feel like I'm the one that did wrong, because I walked out of my husband, because I should have been more forgiving, and I should realize that this was not true, that this is just Satan's way of trying to build a wedge in my family.
Wow. Talk about some victim blaming.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I actually lived like that for 8 years. I remember like pouring my heart out to Jehovah in that hotel room. And I said, I have to do everything that I can to keep my family together, because I didn't want my kids to be separated, and I didn't want that whole life for them. And I said, if I can get my kids to their 18th birthday, and if I fall back in love with my husband, and this would be all worth it. But if not, I'm out. Like, I can't do this anymore. And so I almost became like, I had to live in an emotional prison, because every day I would go check my mail. Every time I would go, I would see this woman. And every time I went to the elders and the brothers, pouring my heart out, saying, I can't move on spiritually. There's something lacking in me. They always told me it was me.
Oh, of
And
course.
I should be more supportive of my husband. And he has told me time and time again that he didn't do it. I need to believe him, even though I had evidence. And so it became this manipulative wheel that at home I was completely in pain and completely alone. And at the Kingdom Hall, I was meant to feel like I had to put on this facade and this smile. And it was slowly the transition of me skipping out on meetings because that was my only time alone. So I did I don't feel good, I have a headache. And then I started researching all of the things that every time I would bring something up, I was always told, you know, that my thinking was wrong, that I was spiritually weak. I needed to be out in service more. I needed to dedicate more time to Jehovah. And so it was just this wheel of manipulation. And finally, I just said enough. I couldn't take it anymore. And I finally just shut down. And that's when like the real truth came to me
Okay,
of everything.
so wow, it just really shows that, I mean, what this sister did to you, it just shows that it's really like they don't care about you, they care about getting you in the organization.
Right.
Like, it was at all costs. How, we're about to lose numbers here. We've got to, it's really, when you think about it, this is all sales. They've got a sale on the hook, and the sale is about to jump off, and I might lose my sale for the year, and I've got to do anything I can or say anything I can to make this person come back to me, because I've got to sell them on this thing that I'm trying to sell them on. And they really, did manipulate you in order just to get you in, because if they cared about you and your husband, there would have been more conversations about this, not, and maybe counseling and things like that. Instead, it's just, suck it up, buttercup, deal with it and make this stick. It's just so insidious because it's not about people. It's just about I don't know if it's about that brother and sister feeling like they got to bring someone into the truth, or
that actually is one of the biggest things, because in our congregation, we were the only family that was brought in its entirety. So they've had a husband or a child or a woman come in, but it was actually a family of 5 coming in all at once.
Yeah.
And so that was a very big highlight. Like, I mean, when I say we were integrated immediately, we were invited to formals, and we were kept so busy and surrounded by so many people who we felt like, wow, these people include us in everything. And, families come with so many dynamics. I mean, we've all been to family events where Uncle so-and-so has a little bit too much to drink, but you just say, oh, that's so Uncle so-and-so.
Yeah.
You kind of just let it go. But to be in group settings of graduations of 300 and something plus people, and there's no arguing, there's no disagreements. There is just, for us, I mean, we were awestruck. But we were treated almost on a celebrity status at the beginning, because that was the one thing that everybody kept saying. We've never had a complete family come in. Like, this is so wonderful. Well, then how do you disappoint that? Like, that's really high to live up to.
Yeah, that's a lot of pressure. And what you were talking about earlier, where you were studying and your husband at the time was locked away in a room, and then slowly but surely he inched his way in, basically. Yeah, those are the things that convention parts are made out of. Those are the families that get highlighted. I don't know if you all did or not, but those are the experiences that are given a lot of times about how somebody won their husband over and things like that.
Well, see, the thing with our situation was, at the beginning, you were supported because something was happening in the family. So you had shepherding calls, and you had, those encouraging brothers who tried to, really act like they heard the woman's side of things. I don't know if this happens across the board. I can only speak for this particular congregation, but it is very much a man's club. The women do not get heard. Yeah, the women do not get heard.
Yeah.
And anytime that something occurs or you bring it to their attention, it's, well, maybe you need to support your husband more. Yep. Or I was told on several occasions, because I was going through a very dark place. I was trying to be who I wasn't authentically. And so I was struggling on a daily basis because I just wanted out. Like, I wasn't happy with the organization. I knew that there was so many things that they were doing that was just unethical on every level. And I was in a marriage that I didn't want to be in. And so I would talk with the brothers and beg them. Like, I was trying to be obedient. I was trying to be the spiritual person that they told me that I should be, but it came with such guilt. So I was guilty if I didn't make a meeting. I was guilty if I didn't make it out in service. And then I was guilty for not wanting to be home because of the reminder of everything here. And so it's just one of those, the manipulation tactics that they use. You don't see it at the time. You always think, well, they know better. These families have been in the truth for so much longer, and you think that they have it all figured out. And so you kind of idolize other families. And that's the one thing that you're encouraged to do, is to go to somebody older in the congregation who's more mature. And so, you would try to tell them your story, but then it was like, well, don't you realize, like, he's a servant of Jehovah now, and, Jehovah forgave him, so you should. And so you slowly just shut down because nobody's hearing you. And the only thing that's being conveyed is, well, Corey, she's lacking spiritually. She's never out in service. And, she just doesn't want to be around anybody. But it's so far from what the truth is. But they only see what they want. They want to see you present, active, and that's all they care about. They don't care about the in-between. They just care about the numbers.
Yeah, the appearance is everything in the organization. And what you said about being a family of 5 coming in, that's huge. that is a big deal to them. So you're obviously having difficulty in your family with your husband over this revelation, and you're going to the elders. Did they? God, I know. I just have to ask. Did they ever do the marital due argument where they basically blamed it on you for you weren't having sex with him enough? So yeah, of course they did.
Yeah,
That's
they
wonderful.
did, because they asked what had happened during that time. Even though he said it never happened. You know, he made up excuses. And I kissed her, I touched her butt. It was all the things but of what actually happened. And
I mean, that's still pretty damning.
right. But to him, he completely shut down. Like, I never had sex with her. And we all know the difference. It's very blatant of what happened. And so when I talked with the brothers about it, they were, they came and they gave us counsel and everything. And at one point they went kind of hard on him, but it had nothing to do with the act. It had nothing to do with, him hurting me, in a way, like, and I kept telling them, he does not love me enough to tell me the truth, because if he did, the truth is what can heal. But this manipulation, this lying and all of that, it just destroyed us. And I remember the brothers saying to him, you have a responsibility before Jehovah, and your wife is sitting here and she's spiritually sick and she is hurting. And I thought, oh my God, I remember in that moment silently praying to Jehovah, thank you so much. Oh my God, they're finally hearing me. And then this is what came out. Your wife should be out in service. And if you are going out in service with your children and you're not encouraging your wife to be with you, that's a problem. And I was just like, oh my God. And I remember at that point, like, what am I doing? Yeah. I'm asking people for help that don't care about me. They care about the numbers. Yep. And I just said, I can't do it anymore. At one point, one of my sons was almost close to being disfellowshipped. And I went to the elders and I said, I'm letting you know now, you can disfellowship me today, but I will never not speak to my child. It won't happen. And the encouragement was, let's see what the judicial committee comes up with. It might not even happen, and you're struggling and worrying for nothing, and that's exactly what happened. Fortunately, he wasn't at the time, disfellowshipped. But I remember, like, not worry about it. Like, you're knowing that I don't agree with your policies, but right now it's not a problem because nothing's happening. Yeah. And I remember one of the girls that I was not close with, but I had been out several times with her, and, through the years of knowing who she was, and she was disfellowshipped. And I remember just looking at her and remembering how many times she sat in the back and nobody made eye contact with her and nobody said anything to her. And when she was reinstated, they were like, I missed you. Oh my God, I'm so happy you're back. And I thought, this is so twisted. Like, I couldn't fathom, like, she can wash her hands right next to you. You don't even say hello. It's nice that you're here. Like, there was, and I couldn't wrap my head around it. And the more I thought about it, it just ate at me. And I thought, these people have to be humiliated and treated so poorly and basically grovel in order to get back into an organization that doesn't care about them. Mm-hmm. And in that moment, I said, I can't, like, the blinders they were just removed. And so I started silently, because I talked with the brothers about going to counseling, and that was looked at so negatively.
Personal counseling or marital counseling?
Personal counseling.
Okay.
They were saying that I'll be manipulated. They'll encourage me to get a divorce. They have worldly views. And so I went to a counselor, and I think, honestly, she's what saved me, because all this time I had been so isolated. I couldn't talk to anybody about it. I couldn't talk to family because then my whole argument about me having the true religion would be bunk.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I couldn't talk to anybody in the organization because being afraid of them reporting me. And so I finally had my voice heard, and I remember just crying and telling her, like, I feel so alone in a world filled with people, but I just felt so isolated. And I said to her, like, I just want to go back to being naive. Like, why can't I go back to that point? And I remember being so frustrated and screaming at her in her office, that poor thing. And I was angry, and I'm like, why can't I just go back to feeling like I could fake it till I make it, you know? And she said, Corey, when that light bulb comes on, you can't shut it off. And like everything that I had known and suppressed, and just every time I would question something and it would be, you know, manipulated by the elders for me to think a certain way or to me believe, it was just coming. I mean, just full throttle. And I felt like I was spiraling because I would be sitting in meetings and the brothers would say something. And I'm like, in my head, I'm like, excuse my language, you're a jackass. You don't even know what the hell you're saying. Like, where, and everything that they were saying, it was just one thing after another that I was like, how did I ever sit through these meetings and have encouragement? And I couldn't take it anymore. And I finally said, I will never step foot in a Kingdom Hall again. And that day, I told my husband, I want a divorce and I'm done. Like, I can't live like this anymore.
So was there a particular thing that was said, or was it just kind of death by a thousand cuts and it all piled up and you just exploded?
Well, one of the things that kept coming up, and it was a theme of that time. I mean, I remember when Brother Morris was talking about the only one that wants to see you in the tight pants are, you know, the men who create them and all of that. And so it was kind of during that transition that I just realized how much hatred that they spew, but they do it with such a smile that people really don't see it.
Yes.
And I remember there was this elder who, I mean, he was a circuit overseer, I'm sorry. And I looked up to him. I mean, his name was Brother Gouveia, and he had this old school Italian swag. And of course, I'm Italian, so I related. Like, it was like almost an extended uncle. And I remember during that time, like, wanting to leave, and I was done. And he gave this talk about faking it till you make it. And I remember in that moment, like, it resonated with me. And I'm like, you know what? I can do this. Like, I can fake this. And then, so fast forward to this moment where I couldn't do it anymore because I finally had just poured my heart out to my husband. I said, I can't, you know, be a part of this organization. You can report me or not. Because we had an argument because I had watched Leah Remini's Scientology episode. That's when the first one aired.
Oh, the one on Jehovah's Witnesses, or the one?
No, this was her
just on
very
Scientology.
first series. Yeah.
Gotcha.
And I remember sitting out here in the living room, and he came out, and I said, this is insane. And he said, what? I go, I cannot believe how many similarities there are with Scientologists and Jehovah's Witnesses. And he said, you're out of your mind. And he like screamed at me. And the next day I had the elders call me. And I said, I never said that Jehovah's Witnesses were Scientologists. I said there's similarities in the practices, in the policies, in how people are treated. And so, of course, you know, the brother that I was speaking to, I was friendly with him. So I trusted him, and I kind of opened up everything to him. And I said, I'm not happy, and I can't fake this anymore. And the more things that keep coming at me, just like you guys say that the light gets brighter and brighter, well, it's getting like that for me. And I can't turn my back on the things that I know and the things that I see are wrong. And I said, and I am tired of this man's club telling me constantly that it's me and it's my burden to make my family work. I'm not the one that ruined my family, and I'm not going to be subjected to this anymore. And so I remember in my mind at the time feeling so guilty after I got off the phone with the brother. And I thought, oh my God, like, I can't believe I just talked to him like that. It's not his fault. And so that guilt started setting in. Mm-hmm. And I said, you know what? It's not the organization's fault. Maybe what it is that I just need to get the divorce. I need to get away from him and start fresh. And then I can be a happy servant again. And maybe that's what I need. And so I kind of had that mindset. And I ended up texting all day long with my husband, and he was just being so nasty. And I realized it had nothing to do with me. These brothers knew exactly who this man was, what he was capable of, and yet they groomed him to be a ministerial servant.
Mm-hmm.
They groomed him. And so everybody in the congregation kept saying, "Oh my God, your husband is so amazing." And it was like, it literally made me hate him more, because I'm like, you're this rock star in the congregation, and yet I hate you. I couldn't even stand sitting next to him. Like, it literally made my skin crawl.
Mm-hmm.
And he would use opportunities, like when we were in the Kingdom Hall, a song would come on and he'd reach over and hold my hand. And I thought, oh my God, if you don't let go of me, I'm going to punch you. Or certain events, like he would always sign us up every weekend. Oh, we're going to this party or that party. And that was his excuse to like sit next to me. And I thought, I can't do this anymore. And
yeah, that's torture. My mom used to have to leave when she would leave the auditorium when my dad would he was an elder, he would give public talks on family life, and my mom would leave.
Yeah.
I understand. I've seen it.
Yeah. You're like, it was almost like his way of trying to get me back in,
Yep.
And I thought, oh no, I couldn't. But I remember that talk about faking it till you make it. And then we had a special talk that same day. And this visiting brother was talking. And I remember him saying something, well, Jehovah's Witnesses aren't like Catholics. We don't allow certain blah, blah, blah. And he went through. And then he started talking about how being gay is a choice. And anyone who chooses this lifestyle is, basically blatantly going against Jehovah, because they have the choice of just not doing it. And I thought, I know, like, I have a nephew, my cousin, I always say nephew because he's younger than me, but it's my cousin's son. I knew at age 2 that the boy was gay. And I'm like, you can't tell me that that's a choice. Just like I don't choose to be a heterosexual. Like, if somebody came to me today and said, what you're doing is wrong and you need to stop it, it's who I am. It's who I've been created to be. And so I remember going to the elders, and I used that illustration about the cake pan. And I said, so you guys say that everyone born after that is born with that imperfection. Well, just like people are genetically disposed to be alcoholics, just like people are genetically, how can you say that that people who are born with this tendency, as you call it, it isn't something that they were born into? Like, people don't just say, yay, I'm going to be gay today.
Oh yeah, because it's such an easy lifestyle in this world. Like, why would anybody choose to do something that is going to have them ostracized and threatened with violence and just all these horrible things? Clearly, they love who they love, and we all do. So you don't choose that,
right? And I've always been the type of person. Growing up in high school, my best friend Adam was gay. I knew he was gay well before he knew he was gay.
Yeah.
I've never seen people differently. I'm all about love, and I'm all about acceptance. And so the more I started realizing that I almost had a lower tolerance for people that I used to, I don't know. I've just always been a go with the flow. I've always had people from all walks of life as friends, young, old, and I always instilled that in my children. And Nico's a perfect example of this. Nico can hang out with somebody who's 9 or 90. It has no bearings on him. He can just talk to anybody. And that's how I raised my kids to be. But when I started noticing my younger son being very harsh in how he thought, or, he started hitting the teenager years, and he was like, well, I can't hang out with so-and-so because he's dating. And I'm like, but what's wrong with that? Well, Jehovah says that you're not supposed to date unless there's a view of marriage. And so he would cut certain friends completely off.
Oh, yeah.
And I started to see this child who I was raising to be a certain way. And it was all about the organization raising him. And
yeah, that's a good point.
And after that talk, I couldn't turn a blind eye anymore. And I just said, no, enough's enough. So that was kind of like that catapult. It was a culmination of so many things, but it was that one moment that I thought, who am I as a mother to fake it till I make it? Then I'm teaching my children to conform to other people's beliefs as long as you're looked at like you're still a part of a group. And I thought, no way, I can't do it.
even believe that I'm a little floored just that talk exists, because I thought one of the whole tenets was that Jehovah knows your heart and he knows if you're really in it or not. So even if you faked it, you're not going to make it, because Jehovah wouldn't accept your service because it wasn't real and from the heart.
Right.
I thought
right.
that's what they taught. But they teach a lot of very contradictory things in order to just keep the people in the status quo, to keep people in, whatever the case may be.
Yeah, I mean, I've sat through talks where I go, what?
Yeah.
And I would look over at my study partner who brought us into the truth, and I would look at him and go, and now he's an elder. Fast forward, I mean, he was a ministerial servant when we first started. He became an elder. And I would look over at him and I'd go, what? And all of a sudden at the end, he would come right over to me and he'd say, well, you have to remember something, Corey. We're all imperfect. And, obviously that brother will be talked to. Well, sorry, it's already went on my ears and I can't just turn a blind eye because he said something so off color. But I mean, I don't know how many times that happened. You were looked at to be a perfect person, yet when somebody else did something, well, we all fall short.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a complete double standard.
Absolutely.
So you get to this moment and you're like, hey, you know what? I want a divorce. I'm out of this. How'd that go over, or what transpired there?
Well, I told my husband that I wanted a divorce. He thought it was nothing but a joke, to the point where he literally laughed in my face. And now, months before this, he would always say to me, I want a divorce. I can't stand you. I'm going to find somebody more spiritual than you. That was his go-to argument when we would have arguments. So this was the first time that I had said it, and I said it with meaning, and he just thought it was a joke. And the brother that I had spoken to about, my issues and everything, I called him and I said, I can't fake this anymore. I said, I want out of the organization. And I said, I emailed you a letter. So I emailed him the letter, basically telling him all the reasons that I wanted out of the organization, all the faults that I had seen, particularly because of my family life, and not feeling supported and not agreeing with the policies of the organization, and that I no longer wanted to be recognized as a Jehovah's Witness. So he called me back and he said, oh my God, Corey, I am so sorry. Like, I didn't realize the magnitude of what you've been going through. And I said, it's taken me a letter for my voice to be heard. I've been going through this for now nearly 7 years. And he said, I am so sorry. And he said, I want you to do this. He's like, I'm not going to move forward with your letter. I want you to pray about this. Give me 2 weeks. See if your thinking and everything changes. So 2 weeks later, I called him and I said, no, I still want to move forward. And I told him, I thank you for your friendship and I thank you for everything. And in that moment, I think he was trying to protect me, because he said, you do realize that you could just fall back. And I said, what do you mean? And he said, you don't have to go through with like leaving the organization, because then they're going to announce you as being disfellowshipped. And he said, but if you simply just take a step back and go inactive, you won't have any of the ramifications that you would if you leave the organization completely. And this was an elder telling me this. Mm-hmm. And, looking back now, I realize that he was really trying to protect me, because I think he realized what disfellowshipping does. But I probably put him in a very awkward position, I'm sure.
I can see that 2 ways. I can see him trying to protect you, and I can also see him trying to keep you in, because even an inactive person is still one of Jehovah's Witnesses, and still counts on the books, as a person. So I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to know what the motives of that person was.
True. And so I finally, I said to him, no, like I need to move forward with this. I need to break free of everything. Like I'm done. And so it was about a week goes by. And of course I would listen in on a Thursday, no announcement. The next week I'd listen in, no announcement again. Now, mind you, I had already talked with my kids. I told them I was leaving the organization. Both of my children in the organization said, Mom, you're fully supported. We're not going to walk away from you. We don't care what the brothers say. Like, you're still our mom. And so I had that security, like, okay, my boys are still going to be there. And you know what? We're going to get through this together.
Right.
And so I called the elder and I said, what the heck is going on? Like, I wrote that letter weeks ago. He said, well, I've been meaning to call you. He said, I just found out that there is a 2-person rule, and you actually have to sit down with 2 of us in order to have this letter go forward.
Nope.
And
that's
I
not
remember
true.
I was livid. And then he tried the manipulation tactic, and he said, well, you know, the convention is coming up and it's going to be very good for you. Why don't you do this? Why don't you go to the convention? And if you still feel this way come Sunday, we will make the announcement. And I remember I was pacing and I was pissed.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, you know what? No, this is where it ends. And I group text all 6 of the elders. And I messaged all of them the letter, and I messaged all of them telling them that I no longer want to be recognized as a Jehovah's Witness. That was Wednesday. Thursday it was announced. Because now there's been 6 of you who have been blasted with this. Don't tell me about the 2-person rule.
Yeah.
And that day it was announced. And I remember like listening to it and feeling like so relieved. And I remember feeling like, wow, all of these things that had been burdening me, like I felt like I had lost 50 pounds instantly.
Yeah.
And that lasted for about 2 seconds. And then the guilt. And I remember crying and thinking, oh my God, did I just make the biggest mistake of my life? Like, I'm going to lose everybody and I am disappointing Jehovah. And you know what? Maybe it is me. Maybe I don't have enough love in my heart to forgive my husband. And you know what? If I don't have enough forgiveness, then Jehovah's not going to forgive me. And it was just this spiraling, like it was me like self-abusing myself over and over. And that took place for about a good 4 months after I walked away. And I remember thinking, I made the biggest mistake. Like I'm the one that they talk about at the conventions who are spiritually sick and don't even know it. And then that's when I started really going to counseling, and I was able to share with her everything. And this was the one thing, she never interrupted me. I literally could talk for 45 minutes and she just let me pour everything out. And the more I started to realize, she was almost making me do therapy on myself.
Yep.
And I was answering almost my own questions and rationalizing my own thoughts. And I finally realized it was going to take a lot of work to undo all of the things that I have been manipulated to tell myself.
Yes. And how long were you in?
How
many years?
I want to say 9 years.
So
I could be wrong.
Let's just think about it. You were in for 9 years. You started studying at 33, right?
Yes.
Oh, well, you're 41 right now?
Yes.
So it couldn't have been 9 years.
I think actually I was 31 when we came into the organization.
Oh, okay, gotcha. All right, so that would have taken you to about 40. But 9 years, a grown human adult, of 30-ish years of age, joins Jehovah's Witnesses, and 9 years later is so devastated mentally and emotionally from being in that environment. It just shows, what impact must that have on kids who are raised in that, because they don't have any experience or any perspective. But it just fascinates me that in just 9 years, they could turn your whole mental and emotional world so upside down. That's not me in any way indicting you. That's just me saying that it just shows the power of the doctrine and what they teach, and the shame and the guilt, the fog, everything they put on you.
Mm-hmm. And then not to think about, even when you're out, the people that you should be relying on are family who are not in the truth, because you need the support, but you're so guilt-ridden because you don't dare speak ill about Jehovah.
Oh,
And you
yeah.
don't dare speak ill about his people.
Yeah.
And then you keep thinking, but this is me. This really isn't the organization. I'm the one, like, I have the problem.
Right.
I'm the one that can't conform to their thinking. You know, all of these people have all of this faith. So really the burden is me. Like, I'm the one who's at fault here.
Mm-hmm.
And it's me and my thinking. And you know what? Maybe I'm rebellious. Maybe I am the person that they always speak about. And so you kind of go through that and you can't speak to anybody about it.
Mm-hmm.
And so you want to desperately reach out to family because you just feel so alone. And then you can't because you're like, well, what if it is me?
Mm-hmm.
And then what happens if I go back to his organization and now my family is going to think something bad about Jehovah? So you always have this like guilt because you can't speak your mind.
Right.
And you can't be heard.
Mm-hmm.
And so
they've got
really
you coming and going, really. They've got you, like, any way you choose to react to that, other than just saying it's all bullshit and walking away.
Right.
Like, pretty much any direction you go, they've got you to where you're going to feel some type of guilt for trying to do healthy things.
Right. And for me, I mean, I had to keep basically putting on the facade as the reason that I was leaving the organization was because of my husband.
Mm-hmm.
Because I had 2 children in the organization, so I didn't dare speak ill about the organization because then that would shut them down.
Right.
And so, you know, over that course of months, my husband was still living in the house because we were trying to maneuver like what was going to happen. And I had already filed for divorce. And that was the only way that he would realize like I was really serious.
Mm-hmm.
And my youngest son, who was still at home, was 16. And so he was like, Mom, don't worry about it. Like we're, you know, so we still hung out and we still did all the things that we would do normally. And then one day in October, he came in and I said, what's going on? And he said, oh, me and Dad are moving out. And I thought, oh, thank God, you know, because I was so over being in the same environment with my husband. And I knew, I mean, based on everything that, you know, my ex was, overall, he's always been a good dad, you know, so I knew that my son would want to go with him. So I wasn't upset about that. And we had already had the talk. So I was golden. Like I was still going to be his mom. The, you know, organization wasn't going to come between us. And then slowly but surely, the phone call stopped. And, you know, those types of things happened. And then it became, well, I really can't speak to you anymore. And it has nothing to do with the organization. It has nothing to do with Jehovah. It's because of your lifestyle. Right. Because God forbid if I have a drink outside of the organization, because I had plenty in. Graduations, formals, barbecues. I mean, we always had drinks.
So
but
the
because
lifestyle
I was having
was your
drinks
drinks?
with worldly people, I was dubbed this, you know, terrible person. And so I had this lifestyle now, you know. And so it became kind of like that. And then I want to say maybe it took about 8 months. And then all of a sudden the relationship just became less and less. And then Nico actually ended up getting on board because he was being encouraged not to speak with me as well. Because, you know, the only way that your mom is ever going to come back into the organization is she really feels alone and she needs to lean on Jehovah in order to come back. And so they were both manipulated to not speak with me.
Mm-hmm.
And
which just shows it's just psychological pressure that they're applying. It has nothing to do with Jehovah God or anything else. It's just let's psychologically manipulate this person into coming back for family relationship.
Right. So here I was, you know, 8 months out with this relief because I finally got my husband out and, you know, grieving my children because I felt so betrayed in that moment, you know, like I thought I've always prided myself on being a good mom and I've always done the best to my ability to be there for them and to give them the best life. And I thought at the moment that I needed them the most, they kind of turned their backs. And so I had to keep telling myself that it wasn't them, it was their teachings. And I had to remember that if it was easy for me at 30 something, how easy is it for these younger ones, you know? And so I had to keep telling myself that. But over time, I mean, my world just became smaller and smaller. And I remember one day, kind of contemplating, like, I didn't really find myself having any worth. And I felt like I couldn't really talk to anybody. And so I felt very isolated and very alone. And I said, I have to get out of the house because I started feeling like almost like I had no purpose anymore. And all of the pills and all of the alcohol and everything that was in the house was just looking more and more enticing. And I thought, wow, this isn't me. I've got to get out of here. And so I went to the grocery store and I thought, okay, this is going to give me a little bit of time to just be out and not have to think about anything. And I remember walking down this aisle and I had seen one of the sisters. Now, mind you, in the truth, she was like my best friend. We vacationed together. We spent our anniversaries together. Like, we did everything together. And she was the one person that I confided in. Like, I mean, talking every detail with her about why I was feeling the way I was, and almost begging for her friendship to help me stay in the truth, because like that was the one thing that kind of held on, was the friendships. I could overlook the whole husband thing because I, learned to just kind of become numb to that situation. But it was the friendships that I had that really kept me in the organization. And so I walked past her and I remember I started getting anxiety and my heart started racing. I was like hot and cold at the same time. And I wasn't sure if I should smile at her or not, because I was kind of happy that I'd seen her, because I hadn't seen anybody in a year, and we all live within blocks radius, And I happened to look up and I caught eye contact with her, and she goes, "Trash."
Oh,
And I remember like my heart sank, and I just thought, wow. And it was just like all of these emotions came in. And I remember coming home and I ended up grabbing a bottle of wine and I had a couple glasses of wine. And I remember just sitting here crying in the dark. And I thought, sorry.
Oh, it's okay.
I just remember thinking like, my kids don't love me.
Yeah.
I have no friends. I'm alone. Like, I just remember at that moment, like, nobody would miss me if something should happen, And so I just cried. And I remember just crying this cry that I just never cried before. And I thought, wow. And it was the anger. The anger, I think, is what actually kept me from killing myself that night, because I had all the means, all of the resources to do it. But it was the anger of, you might have manipulated me. You might have lied to me and made me sugarcoat everything that I had seen that I knew was wrong. But my fight was for my kids, because I had to get them out of that organization. And I think people don't realize the pain that comes when somebody's shunned. They are removed from their family, I mean, let alone the friends that become your family. But I don't think any person that has not been shunned could ever conceive. It's like being dead but not buried.
Yeah.
Because
absolutely.
in every aspect, people treat you like you don't even exist anymore. And so you lose the value of who you think you are. And then when your children end up doing the same thing, you just think like, wow, like I really don't matter. And it's a really, really dark place to be. And prior to this, I mean, I've always been in the medical field, and I've always thought like, in my head, mental illness, there's causes and reasons why people, commit suicide. And I always thought it was a chemical imbalance, or it's, but it's not, it is that part of you in every person that you want to have that sense of belonging, and you want to have that acceptance. And when people don't see you for who you are, you go down a pretty dark road. I mean, I've always considered myself a very strong person, but in that moment, that seemed like not even about ending pain or anything like that. It just seemed like that was the logical thing to do, because it really didn't matter if I existed or not.
I definitely feel you there. When I was at my lowest and suicidal, it was primarily because I didn't feel like anybody really understood me. I didn't really feel like I necessarily understood myself. I knew I wasn't really being 100% authentic. I think I can really echo a lot of what you said, and it wasn't so much a desire to die, but just a what's the point
Right.
at that moment. And yeah, it's a really desperate place to be. I think we all need to be seen for who we are. We all want to be loved for who we are. And to purposefully cut off that love. I'm not going to sit here and blame the people that shun, because I think a lot of them, they're cult victims too. But the organization is evil, that puts that on people. And, if you think your God tells you to do that, well, he's evil too. I can get on board with that. So, you know, I don't think that it's, if you believe that God is love, then you can't believe that. I mean, with what was it the scripture would say? Like, with evil things, God cannot be tried, nor does he try anyone. Well, shunning is evil, and psychologically manipulating people and making them feel so low that they want to kill themselves. That's evil. So if you want to say that's from God, but you believe God is love, then you've got a whole lot of contradictions that you need to shore up before you go on with your beliefs. So it's just it's a really sad thing that they do to people. It's one of the reasons that I wanted to do this podcast, because shunning just puts people in such a low, desperate place. And I'm glad you kind of brought that to the attention.
Yeah, and I think that
happened.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the most important thing that I want people to understand, is that, you know, a lot of people see you leave, and then they see, you know, they're all anticipating, oh, she's going to become a prostitute, she's going to become a drunk, a druggie, she's going to have this lavish lifestyle, always, because that's what these conventions convey, you know, that when somebody leaves Jehovah's organization, by golly, they can't be normal. Like, this has to be the extravagance. Like, they're going to end up on drugs in the street, or, you know, promiscuous, they'll get AIDS. I mean, that's just what's taught. And so a lot of people see you at the beginning and you leave, and then they see the aftermath, but they don't see what you went through in order to get back to being the authentic you.
Yeah,
and so
that's a long, hard road.
Yeah. And then, you know, when you have somebody who's close to you who leaves the organization, you know, whether it be a friend, a family member, or in my case, my son, you know, to see him now going through that journey, it literally makes me relive all of those emotions again, because it just brings back those things that are at surface, you know, the anxiety, the loneliness, the, you know, trying to discover who you are. And so when you're trying to support your child who's now going through all of those emotions, you know, it can be really hard, because you're almost reliving what happened to you, and now you're trying to protect him because you don't want him to have to suffer the way you do. But then again, you have to realize that everyone has their journey. And so in order for him to come out authentically who he needs to be, he has to go through certain things. And so it's, you know, it's hard.
Can we,
you know,
can we talk for a second about finding yourself? When you said that, it really struck me, because for a lot of us, we grew up in the organization, and I don't think we ever had a chance to really figure out who we were. For you, you had an authentic self prior to, you know, the age of 31-ish, when you started studying and everything. When you left, do you feel like, maybe it's not a fair question, but do you feel like it was maybe easier to find yourself again because there was a previous self? Or do you feel like you had been so changed that you were just a totally different person? I think it's an interesting concept.
Yeah, I think that in my particular situation, I grew up with a mom who was very selfish, and so I was kind of like her mother in a lot of ways. And so I went from that to becoming a mother at 19. And so I always vowed, like, my children will never see me drugged up, angry, all of that. And so I had this notion that my family life was going to be completely different from what I was used to when I grew up. And so when I became a mother, my entire life was about my children. So
Yeah.
I went from being a child to a child who had a mom who was on drugs to a mother at 19 and trying to figure out what that looked like at 19. And so I think that's where I became identified. Like my identity was being a mom. And so for the years from 19 all the way until I became a Jehovah's Witness, that's what I was. I was somebody's wife and I was somebody's mother. And so my life kind of revolved around my kids. So I think that it was kind of like, the conveyor belt. You go through the life of raising your children, and my kids were young when we came into the organization, and it was more of, I think I thought I discovered myself being in the truth, because I thought I was always trying to fight throughout raising my kids of who I didn't want to be, because I didn't want to raise my children the way that my mother raised me.
Mm-hmm.
And I always wanted to make sure that I told my kids, I love you. That was huge for me, because my mom would tell me, but very sparse, so I always
Right.
wanted my kids to know, like, I love you and you're valued and you're important. And so I went from trying to be who I didn't want to be. And then I think when I came into the organization, I seen so much love and so many things in other families. Like, I had a blended family. My husband was not the father of my first two children. And so that was an embarrassing thing for me, because I had, a failed relationship. And so now I had a blended family. But when I went into the organization, there was multiple families in there with blended families. And so I thought, wow, here I was holding these people to this pedestal, but they're like me. Like, they have flaws and they have, family dynamics that don't make sense to other people. But I was never made to feel embarrassed there. I felt very comfortable. And so at the beginning, I think I might have thought I was happy,
Yeah.
But it was after the organization that I realized I had to find out who Corey was.
Yeah,
It
that's what I'm
was,
hearing here. You went from caretaker for your mom to caretaker for
mhm.
your kids
And then I
to
was a
caring
caretaker
about an
for my grandmother.
organization and your
Yeah,
grandmother.
because my grandmother had cancer, so I was the caretaker for her for 2.5 years.
Right, but
And
so where's
so,
Corey?
yeah, yeah. And so I think that all of a sudden, and I think what happened was my middle son, who was never a part of, like, he was a part of the organization, but he never was baptized, didn't really want to do a whole lot with the organization. He moved out. And then Nico ended up moving up to the Cape. And so I just had my young son here. And I remember one day, it was just one of those things, like, you get up in the morning, you start the coffee pot. It's just very automatic, robotic type stuff. And so I made dinner, and I remember putting everything on the table. And my son Andrew came out and he goes, Mom, what the heck are you doing? And I said, What? And he goes, You've got 6 plates or 5 plates out here. And I'm like, Yeah. And then it took me a second, and I realized that 2 of my kids were no longer in the house. And I remember, like, crying, and I thought, oh my God, my life is changing. And so it was like one of those moments where all of a sudden the organization was gone. But I was like, wow, now, even though I'm somebody's mother, I wasn't able to mother them, you know? And so I felt like I wasn't anyone's wife anymore. My kids were gone. I don't have friends anymore, other than a few that I had made, during Zumba and certain things that I would do to keep myself busy away from the organization.
Mm-hmm.
So it was a power struggle to figure out, my life was always about other people's wants and what did anyone
Yep.
else need. And so for
Yeah.
the first time,
That's what I was
I
thinking.
didn't know how to be selfish. And I
Yeah.
thought, wow, well, what do you mean I have to figure out what I want to eat for dinner? Like, usually it was my boys saying, Mom, can we have this? Can we have that? And so it was a lot of those moments that I think were the hardest transition, because I started, trying to date to try to get normalcy.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, what am I doing? Like, I'm mothering these people, because I was looking for that purpose. I was looking for that void to be filled, and I needed to care for somebody. And then, about a year ago, it really hit me that no, I just need to take care of me,
Yep.
and it's okay. But, every day is different. Sometimes it's, you have to just think back of how far you've come. And I think that the anger towards the organization was so strong for so long. And now I'm angry at the things that have occurred because of it. But I try to see the happiness that, some of the things brought as well. It wasn't all bad. And I think that's what keeps people in there. And I think that's
Sure.
what keeps people enticed to keep coming into the organization. But I learned a lot about love. I learned a lot about um, the wants that I wanted for my family as far as a happy family life and things like that. And so I I try not to live my life in an angry stance anymore. I just try to wake up in the morning and I have a gratitude journal. I always give myself self affirmations, and at first it was so foreign and I felt so corny for doing it.
Yeah.
But the more and more you do it, and the moments that you're just by yourself in your thoughts, I
Mhm.
allow myself, this is how I live now. I allow myself to be pissed off for a half hour about whatever situation happens. I only allow, okay, Corey, you have a half hour, be pissed off, get it out now, because after that half hour, you're moving forward. And so I have to really tell myself, like, it's okay to be mad and it's okay to be angry, but it's not okay to live there.
Yeah, well, I was going to ask, do you find so something that I found was I had a lot of anger, and I found that a lot of it was really masking some profound sadness that I didn't really know how to deal with. I didn't know how to feel or experience. So I turned to, I think anger was just the convenient mask for myself anyway. I was just wondering,
Hmm.
have you found that some of the anger that you hold is really, sadness underneath it, or just
Not
wondering?
sadness for
Hmm.
me, for mine is guilt.
Ah, guilt.
Yeah,
Interesting.
guilt because I felt for so long that it was my grieving that brought us into this organization.
Ah,
You know, um, my
interesting.
kids my kids bucked the situation. I mean, from day one, they were like, "We don't want anything to do with this. This is stupid. What do you mean no Christmas?" And it was always this thing. And my kids never wanted to go to the Kingdom Hall, and that's what kept us from going for so long because they didn't want any part of it. And so I think that all the moments that you think back, like them saying, "Mom, I don't want to go out," and you're like, "You're going to that door," you know?
Yeah.
And all the times that they didn't go out, and then the brothers were like, "But you got to keep encouraging them when they're in your house. These are your rules." And, so all of the things that I think that came with mothering them through the organization,
Hmm.
that's where the guilt came in. And I think that one of the things that my ex-husband said to me, and he said it quite a bit up until probably, I don't know, maybe 8 months ago, he used to say to me, "You're the one that brought us in this organization, then you just left." And now I realize he has his own issues, and I'm sure he wants to leave. He's just not as strong as me. He's one of
Yeah,
those
it
people
sounds
that
like
will,
it.
yeah, he's one of those people that'll just, conform because that's just the thing to do. But in that moment that he said that, I realized it was almost like him saying, "You got out and we didn't." And
Yeah.
so I think that
Wow.
that guilt of him saying that, I thought, wow, you know what? I am the one that brought this into my family's life. And so I was the first to leave, and there was an abandonment feeling of that. I felt like, because of the hurtful things that my husband would say, like, this is the thing that, it was the repeating cycle for the last almost 2 years. You left your husband, you left your children, and you left your God. And so that was always said to me, like,
Mm,
via text, via argument, in court, out of court. I mean, it was just always that. And so I know that my youngest son is subjected to hearing that all the time.
mm.
And so even though I didn't walk out on my husband, he walked out on me long ago. I just chose
Yeah.
to not be a stepping stone anymore. I didn't walk out on God. I walked out on Jehovah. There's a difference.
Hmm.
I still very much believe in God. I don't know if I necessarily believe in the Bible. I don't I don't have any desire to serve God anymore. In the context of, like, maybe getting into another religion or anything. I don't believe in religion. I I feel very spiritual, and I feel like there's a higher being, and I feel like if at the end of this I find out he's there, good, and if not, whatever,
Right.
I don't feel the way I used to as far as having a higher being or a purpose or anything like that. I just pride myself on being a good person, and I pride myself on exhibiting love in everything that I do, and making sure that people that are in my life know that they're valued and that I love them and that they're genuine to me. And those are the things that I focus on now. But I think it's just the guilt. It's the guilt of feeling like you abandoned your children even though you didn't.
Yeah, and it's not like you had, you know, I know that you didn't have any malicious intent when you did bring this into the house or whatever. You were trying to do the right thing, even back then. So it's not like um, you brought the witnesses into the house because you just hated your family or something.
Right.
You were trying, you were exploring something, and you didn't know that it was going to end up being this big thing that was going to have so much weight to it. I mean, how could you have known? You couldn't have known. Um, and so intent matters when you look at these things. There was no malicious intent, but I understand. I understand, feeling some responsibility or whatever the case may be. It's not really yours to bear, and at this point, everybody has to make their own choices. But it's still, emotions don't always have to be aren't always logical, and
Hmm.
it's tough, I'm sure. How do you? So do you? Where are you at now as far as your family? Like, who's out, who's in? What's your status?
So I'm happy to announce that I am actually divorced as of January.
Oh,
After,
congratulations!
thank you. After a very, very hard, long divorce. My oldest son, Nico, who's actually been on the podcast,
Right.
he has been out, I believe, almost a year now.
Mm-hmm.
And our relationship is amazing. He calls me every day, and I'm super proud of him. He has just shown me who I raised, and he's
Yeah.
got an amazing heart. And, to know him is to know that love exists. He's just an overall awesome young man. And I'm so, so proud of him. My middle son is in the Army, and he never became a Jehovah's Witness, thank goodness.
Hmm.
And lives in North Carolina and is doing amazing, married, and just overall living a very good life. And my youngest one, unfortunately, he's 18. I speak with him every now and then. I try to just let him know that I love him and that I'm unconditionally here for him. But he does live with dad, so he has that influence.
Right.
And I'm just struggling a little bit because I reach out to him often, telling him how much he's loved and try to see how his days are going. And some days are good and he'll open up and we'll talk. And other times it's just about when he needs something, he'll reach out like, oh,
Sure.
can you buy me a car? Can you do this? And before Nico left the organization, I would put myself into debt and I would give Andrew basically anything he needed because that was the only way I kept the relationship going.
Yeah.
Because the brothers told him, you can speak to your mom about household matters, but personally, like, you can't break bread with her. You can't go out to
Oh,
dinner. You can't do anything like that. And so,
I hadn't
when
thought
he would
about
call
that.
me and he would say to me, Mom, do you have, $25? I would be negative $22 in my account. And I would say, yeah, don't worry about it. I'll send it right over. And then I would get hit with a $30 charge. And I would do that often because I never wanted to tell him no, because I always felt like if I tell him no, then he can, somebody in the organization can say, see, she doesn't really care. So I never gave any way for that to ever happen. And so I would put myself in very bad situations financially because I just wanted to make sure that I could always tell him yes. And then it took Nico really saying, Mom, he might be young, but he's using you, and that's not
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
And so it was a hard conversation for me and Nico to have, but I know that Nico had my best interest, and it was hard to swallow. And so lately I've been more strong when it comes to that. I'm like, no, I don't have it. Or if I do have it, I'll give it to him. But just basically letting him know, that I love you and that I'm here. But like I told him, I can't allow you to use me either. And it's not fair. You won't, he never makes the initiative to call me. I've asked him a few times if, can we go out to eat? And he's like, oh, I don't think that's a good idea. And so I just keep holding out hope that something wakes him, and I hope that it's not in a bad way. But I guess it's hard when you have such a closeness with your kids, like, especially with Andrew, we did a lot together and we were really close. And so I think that there's just a lot of hurt, and I try to see it from his standpoint, being 16 and uprooted and your whole life kind of changing. And so I try to play devil's advocate for both sides, but now we're 2 years out. And so at some point, I hope that maybe he matures enough to understand that, I didn't leave him. I did make him a video on his 17th birthday, and I sent it to him. It wasn't very good. I was pretty hysterical, but I basically, cried myself to him, and I told him how much he's loved and that this situation had nothing to do with him. It was a failed marriage, and it was me not believing in the same organization as him, but that doesn't discredit my love for him or being his mother. And so I, I try to tell him in as many ways as I can that I love him, but it's hard, it's hard being able to celebrate certain things or to, have little milestones or, like the boys this year both called me on Mother's Day and said Happy Mother's Day. And it just, just having that moment. Nico and my oldest son, and my middle son, Martin, came home last October, and they were both here for 9 days. And it was completely amazing because we were all just authentically us, and we had so much fun. And so in those moments, where we're having a good time, your mind goes and you realize who's not there.
Oh yeah.
And it was really hard because the boys were acting like grown babies. they were so funny, and they were with the Nerf guns.
Yeah.
And they're shooting me, and we're laughing, and my middle son happened to run down to the end of the hall where our bedrooms are. And he came out, and now this is the one, he's not very emotional at all, very monotone. And he came out, and he had this look on his face, and Nico's like, what's the matter? And he goes, oh my God, for a split second, it felt like we were kids, and I ran down into Andrew's room to shoot him and realized he wasn't here.
Yeah.
And so it's like, in those moments, it's hard, because there's just such a wedge. And so
yeah, it makes you think of like the death of a relative or somebody. You go to their chair and they're not sitting in their chair anymore, or whatever the case may be. The good news here is that hopefully, I mean, he's just an 18-year-old kid. He's got a lot to learn and a lot of growing to do,
and that's why when I say, like, I use the terms trying to play the devil's advocate or both sides, because I have to remember, what about those moments during the Kingdom Hall for him when, they're playing a song about family, or, or there's a talk from the podium about something about mothers or something. And I have to remember that, he's experiencing this too, but from the inside.
Yep.
And so I just try to tell myself, he's the one spiritually sick,
right.
And I have to remember that he's being manipulated. And so I think that my focus has been to basically kill the organization with their tactics. They want to say that love conquers all, and the organization is all about love. Well, you know what? I am going to love my son through this, and I am going to just make sure that I am there for him and show him in as many ways as I'm allowed to, that I'm here, and hope that love prevails. And hopefully, he'll see that, the manipulation is not what it is. Not everybody that leaves the organization is a bad person. And that was one of the things that I tried to explain to him. I am the same person that used to sit in that Kingdom Hall.
Yeah.
And yet I was accepted, invited, loved on. I had great friends. And the moment that that seat was not sat in anymore, I became, this horrible person in everybody's eyes.
You're
But the
probably a
core
better
of me,
person now.
yeah, yeah, because you know what? I am who I was when I walked in that organization,
Yep.
but a better version of myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's why I try, when I hear people who leave, and honestly, I try not to surround myself with too many people who have left, because you can take on that anger that people go through.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's more about, I have to remember, I'm a person that believes that everything in life happens for a reason. And for me, I say, okay, these are the bad things about this organization. And God, do you know, I would love more than anything to stand outside of that Kingdom Hall and tell everybody that ever walks in there of how terrible it is.
Right.
But that can't be who I am. I can't crusade for everybody. And so I have to just find the balance. I have to find, yeah, it's okay to be angry and to hate certain things about this organization. But on the flip side of it, I can't consume myself with being angry, because I feel like I spent so many years of my life in this organization being angry. And I have a second chance. And so I'm trying to just live in that chance and just take it for everything that I want it to be. I was lucky to get out. And so it's hard, because there's such a part of you that just wants to free everybody, and you want everybody to see what they're made of, and you want to blast them, and you want to be at every convention protesting. But then for me, I have to remember that that was a really dark place for me, and that's not a place I want to stay. And so it's hard. It's hard to try to find the balance of what you can do. And that's why I think like what you're doing is so amazing, because it's a level that I'm not capable of. And so I feel like everybody has their own individual things that they can bring.
Absolutely.
And so I always say, like, I try to empower others. I think that everybody has their own special gifts, and there's so many things that we can learn from one another. But I just try to stay away from the hate part of it, because it can consume you, and you can end up becoming a part of another organization that you just don't realize. And that's the hate club, And so
Yeah.
I just try to find the balance. And I realize that I don't have to agree with everybody anymore. And that's, I think, the most powerful thing that I
Yep.
realized walking away. Like, it's okay, like, if I have a difference of opinion, because I'm not told what to think anymore. And so I think that that's the best gift that I got, was the fact that I got my own thinking abilities back. Because you don't realize when you think that you're thinking for yourself.
Yeah, I know. We
But
all
you
said
so
that.
are not.
Right.
You know?
We were all like, "Oh, it's not a cult. I'm not, brainwashed. I know what I'm doing."
Yeah. And the funny thing is, I look back, me and my mom just had this conversation a few days ago, because me and my mom, she was one of the hardest ones that I would get so angry with her, because she would come up with these questions, and I'm like, and I had no answer. So one of the things she said to me one time was, "So you go to baby showers, right?" And I said, "Yeah." And she goes, "Do you bring a gift?" And I said, "Of course." And she said, "Oh, okay." She said, "Well, when the baby's born, when you go to the hospital, do you bring a gift?" And I said, "Yeah. I mean, I'll bring flowers or whatever. I'm going through this whole thing." And she says, "And when the child graduates college or high school, you go to a party and you have a gift." And I said, "Yeah, but you can't celebrate their birthday." And I remember just being furious with her, because I'm like, "Well, you don't see the point." And I would yell at her. And then, but it was more of the fact that I had no rebuttal.
Of
Like, I had
course.
no
Right.
logical reason other than the whole, well, there was two accounts in the Bible,
Right.
and the whole, spiel that we've all given. But I
Absolutely.
remember in those moments, like, being so angry. And then now we laugh about it. And she's like, "Corey," she's like, "I tried, but girl, you were in." So we laugh about it now. But I remember, like, certain times, like, she would get me with these questions, and I'm like, "What the heck?"
Yeah. And it's funny for people like us on the outside. A lot of times, people on the inside would say, "Well, you were never a true believer anyway," or something like that, and that's just absolutely not true.
Right.
Obviously, you bought it hook, line, and sinker. You would have. You were defensive over these things. I did too. A lot of us did, and I think that's what makes that. That's why a lot of us speak out or whatever we do, because we don't want to see other people buy it, and maybe we can inoculate some of the general public against it by sharing our stories, plus helping poor people who are just feeling alone. We've all been in that place.
Mm-hmm. There was I wish I would have looked it up because I wanted to share it with you, and I don't remember this man's name. But when I finally left and I was able to actually look online without feeling like this horrible apostate, I remember looking up, there was a brother, he was a ex-elder, and he has his own YouTube, and he was talking one day, and I remember what he said was like the biggest aha moment. He was talking about how they manipulate and how they get people into the organization. And I'm thinking to myself, well, they didn't manipulate me because I'm too smart for that, And so, that whole Italian stubbornness was definitely at the forefront. I'm like, no way.
Right.
And he goes, remember back when you were a witness? He's like, and you went into these very suburban areas. Think logically, think honestly. How many people actually took the Watchtower and Awakes or the brochures that you were trying to place?
Mm-hmm.
And then he goes, and I'm going to pause. So I'm like, well, not many that I can remember. So he goes, not many, right? And I said, oh, I felt like he was talking directly to me through the YouTube.
He's reading your mind.
He's right. And he goes, why? Because you can't offer them hope. You can't offer them anything that they aren't able to get for themselves. He goes, now fast forward to the ghetto areas or the less affluent areas.
Yes.
How many people would you place with? How many studies would you get?
Yep.
And I was like, I remember I had goosebumps from head to toe, and I was like, wow. And then he goes, and think about it. What are the things that they usually use in order to get you in? And it's hope. Mm-hmm. It's everlasting life. It's preying on your vulnerabilities. And so he went through, and just the way he delivered this message, I was like completely enamored. And I remember I was up all night thinking about it because I was like, wow, it's so true. And I kept looking back in my study logs alone because, we all had that pull off the side of the road and you write down Susie with 2 dogs and broken marriage and whatever else. And I went through my log and I thought almost every single one of them, except an elderly lady who I was studying with. And she was just curious because she had never heard Jehovah's name at that point. So, but everyone else had major issues.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And I'm like, no wonder. And then I felt like, the guilt set. And I'm like, I am over here, trying to make them believe that I have this hope for them. And I was like, wow. But it's crazy because we all pride ourselves on being pretty, thinking people. I mean, especially in America. I mean, I can't speak for other countries. But in America, you are really given some pretty amazing tools. We are very gifted in the fact of education. And so when you think that you can't be manipulated, because you're like, no way it can happen to me. I'm on it.
Yep.
And then you look back and somebody starts pointing a spotlight and you realize wow, these tactics are good.
Would you like me to make this even worse for you?
Sure.
Not only were we manipulated, but I don't know about you, at least in the congregation that I grew up in, there were projects in some very poor areas, but there were also, some $300,000-$400,000 pretty nice houses, and which at least here in this area, a $300,000 or $400,000 house is pretty nice. I know in some areas of the United States, the cost of living, but anyway, so you had the ghetto areas and the areas that were super nice. And when we would go out in the super nice areas or the suburban areas, and no one would ever take literature from us or whatever, the statement was always, they would always tell us, well, those people are having their reward in full today, so they don't need this. So not only were we out trying to manipulate people, but like we were even being told, really, we were kind of low-key being told, yeah, we're just out there selling hope, and those people have their hope being filled, so they don't need us. So let's just go to the ghetto and talk to these people. And I think one of the worst things about the manipulation that a lot of us went through is that if you really start looking in the publications and you start listening to what's said in the talks, not only were we being manipulated to do a certain thing, they were freaking telling us that they were manipulating us and we didn't see it.
Right. That's what's worse.
It makes it even worse. It's like, my God, not only was I being taken on a ride, they were telling me they were taking me on a ride and I didn't even see it.
Right.
But that's just part of being human and part of being caught up in something. And
I remember getting yelled at by one of the elders, and he was pretty nasty about it because I couldn't understand how I was being told as a parent, because my son wanted to go to college, my middle son. And they were like, you really need to, guard against that. It's not what Jehovah's organization wants. It's not what Jehovah wants. Like Satan's going to eat up your child and, the whole tactics that they use. And I said, okay, well then explain to me, if that's true, why is it that Jehovah's organization has their own lawyer and put the brother through school? And I mean, when I say I got daggers for eyes looking at me, and I remember in that moment going, oh shit, I think I crossed the line.
Yeah.
Because it was not appreciated. And they said, well, it was for the better of the organization. Yep. We don't want worldly people making legal decisions for us and this and that. And I thought, man, the double standards.
Oh yeah, and they hire worldly lawyers now too, anyway. So
right,
because they don't have enough to cover all their child abuse cases.
Exactly.
So I wanted to ask you. So what about something you can speak to that maybe a lot of people can't necessarily is, so you got to be there for one of your sons when Nico came out of the organization. Mm-hmm. So what was that like for you, or what was that? Can you speak to that experience?
Yeah. So it was a long year plus that I hadn't spoken with him. And I remember people telling me, you have to remember that Jehovah's organization says that Jehovah will not forget the love you've shown. Mm-hmm. So you got to use that same tactic with your thinking now. You have to know that your children will not forget the love that you've shown. And eventually they will come home. Mm-hmm. And so I had to keep telling myself, like, I had to stop beating myself up because I was doing such a good job at that on a daily basis. And I had to remember, like, no, I was a good mom and I do love my kids and I want the very best for them. And so I had to build myself back to being who I am today, because I wanted that to be who he sees when he comes home.
Yeah.
And so, but honestly, I had to put it out of my mind after a while, because I want to say it was probably about a month and a half, maybe 2 months, that I had to just stop, and I had to just keep moving. And I said, you know what, if he comes home, he comes home, but I cannot keep this. Like, it was a daily log, Yeah,
you can't hold vigil every day. I mean, at a point, it's up to that person if they come home or not.
Right. And that's what I had to finally do, because it was kind of sucking me back.
Yeah.
And I remember laying in bed and my phone rings and I happened to look down and it said Kona. And I said, okay, holy shit. And I jumped, excuse my language. And I jumped up and I said, and I said, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God. And I was like, Corey, do not get excited. This is not him. This is a telemarketer and you're going to just be ridiculous. Oh. So I must have let it ring about 3 times. And then I finally answered it and I said, hello. And he said, Mom. And I lost it. I cried. I mean, when we were manipulated into thinking like, oh, all of a sudden you'll be walking in this green path and then your dead loved one will come back.
Yeah, yeah.
That is that emotion. Like I can't even put it into words.
Yeah, it is a resurrection of sorts. Yeah.
Yeah. And I just remember like crying this cry that I had not cried. And, but the crazy thing is that seeing him go through the guilt, when he was here in October, he just kept apologizing over and over again. Like, Mom, I'm so sorry. I walked away and this and that. And I said, you didn't know any better. You only know what you know at the time,
Right.
But it's crazy because in the moments that was happening, it was my entire world. So I felt the absence of my kids every single moment.
Yeah.
So to me, it was hell. But I'll tell you, the minute that I heard his voice and the minute it was like that occurrence was for a half a second. It was crazy to me how all that pain was erased immediately.
Yeah.
And it was just that homecoming that I had just prayed and prayed and prayed and prayed about. And yeah, and so now I just look back and it just seems like it was yesterday and then today. I don't even really remember the pain because I remember it being so bad, but I remember that moment that I heard his voice, and that was everything.
I think that's a beautiful sentiment because I think it'll really help some people out there. I mean, there are a lot of people who have lost kids to the organization and who, hold vigil on whatever level and really are hoping to see those kids again. And I can only imagine how that must feel. I don't have that experience, but I think I'm really glad that you were able to express that. And how does it feel now? Now you've got Nico. Do you all get to talk a lot, or what's your relationship like now?
We talk every day. He calls me every day. Yeah, I mean, it's almost like there was just no time lost. And so I think that the one thing that I would say to anybody who's going through what I have experienced is know that the pain is temporary, and whether it be temporary in the sense of maybe in this lifetime we don't get the pleasure of having that one come back,
Right.
But I guess the most important thing is to remember that, it's temporary. And right now it consumes you. I mean, if somebody told me, I'm sure plenty of people told me, oh, he'll come around, but I never seen it. I didn't really see it with Nico because Nico is a lot like me. Very, very opinionated, very strong in his beliefs. And when he finds, put it this way, Nico was always the kid who found the one who was being bullied on the playground and became his friend.
Yeah.
Nico was always liked. The funniest story that I could tell is he was in kindergarten and the teacher called and said, can you come in for a parent-teacher conference? And I said, sure. And she said, never in my experience of 20 years teaching have I ever seen anything like this. And I thought, oh my God, what did he do? Because he was always a great learner, but oh my God, he couldn't shut up. He would talk constantly, and that was on every single report card. Great student, very, on top of academics, but he doesn't stop talking. So it was like this big joke. And so when she said this, I thought, oh my God, what did he do? And she said, I just want you to look at the wall. And it was a wall of them drawing what they wanted to be when they grew up. And so most of the kids were nurses and doctors and policemen, and, the normal, typical 5-year-old, things that they want to become. And then the part on the side, it was like, what kind of foods do you like, and yada, yada, yada. Well, the last part was, who is your best friend? Every student in the class had Nico's name.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, what? I'm like, proud mama moment.
That's awesome.
But like, he's always been like that. So I never thought he would come around, only because to me, his conviction of the truth was so strong that I thought there's no way. I mean, he's a Taurus in all aspects of his life. Like, he is a bull, and so I thought, no way. If Nico's made this stance, like, he's never coming back. And so I kind of held out hope for Andrew because Andrew's more softy like me. on that side of who I am. And so I thought, well, maybe he'll miss me enough and he'll want to, come back. But it's been almost the opposite, where the emotions have kept Andrew away, and Nico's conviction of finding the truth was so strong that he actually found that it's not the truth. And so it worked, in a different sense. So it's kind of weird. I mean, I guess it's a good thing for those who are going through it, who you think your child or a family member or, so-and-so who's left. But at the end of the day, you don't, because you don't know someone's heart on the inside, And so I think that the best thing that we could do is just continue to be who you authentically are, love those that are around you unconditionally, and just try to make a presence with them, whether it's sending a letter that you don't think is getting opened, sending a text message or an email, or calling. You have to just keep trying, because you never know, when you have to use the same tactics that they use in the organization. You keep knocking on the door until they take the brochure. You really have to just,
it's true.
That's the mindset, you know? So I think that that's the biggest thing, is like, you have to know at the end of the day that you can only do your best.
Yeah, and the decision is out of your hands, but the only thing you can control is your own effort. So that that's the only thing you can do, and whatever happens out of that is on that other person. So let's talk about Corey for a minute.
Okay.
So let's end this on a Corey note. What do you like about your life since you've left, and what do you want to make out of it?
I think the biggest thing is that I like that I'm happy.
Yeah.
I'm not happy because I have the best of circumstances, because I'm struggling. I'm a single person. I have a lot of bills, and, I run a business. And so I have all of the things, but I think it's just finding happiness no matter what.
Yeah. Yeah. Happiness can be regardless of circumstances.
Yeah. And I always thought, my happiness came because of my kids, or my happiness came because of such and such. But I just realized, like, I'm just extremely happy with waking up in the morning, and I find the simple things, being able to sit outside for 10 minutes before my daycare opens and having my coffee and just listening to the birds and just having just that moment. It's fine. I guess this is the biggest thing, finding happiness being with yourself.
Yeah, that's a great one.
Yeah. If I had to sum up, it really has come down to me being happy with being my own company.
Yeah, I remember I had to figure that one out myself. Because if you don't like yourself, first of all, nobody else is really going to like you either. And second of all, you can't you're never going to be happy. I mean, it's happiness is an inside game, and if you don't like yourself, you're just not going to ever find it.
Yeah. And I think I had to learn it, because I said, oh my God, I'm 41 and going to start dating again. Like, what the heck? I mean, this is not the dating scene that I had.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
So I'm like, what do you mean? What is friends with benefits? Whoa, okay. Like, what the heck? And so I just realized, like, this dating thing is more of like situationships. And so
I like that.
I've had to maneuver.
Yeah.
And I think that I was so easily, like I said, to conform, because I wanted to have that part of me being met. I wanted to care for somebody and nurture somebody.
Yeah.
And then I said, no. So I don't know if you've had a chance to, like, look at my Facebook, but people laugh. Like, I put posts up of, like, me having dinner by myself. I take myself out to the movies. I take myself out to dinner. I make my own little romantic TV tray, with my book, and I'll sit with a glass of wine and have dinner by candlelight, but I do it for me.
That is awesome. And I think I don't think we're friends. I think you're just in my Facebook group. So expect a friend request. I got to see
there
this.
There you go. But yeah, I mean,
awesome.
I do stuff like that, and, there's a place around here. It's the Reservoir, and it's just the tranquility alone. So, I mean, I just try to be open to learning so much I'm learning more about the universe and synchronicity and how things happen. And I'm just trying to not shut things down like I used to, just having an open concept about life in general. But I think that getting to know me and getting to know that it's okay not to agree with everybody. Because, if somebody said, oh my God, this Brussels sprout salad is amazing, I'm like, yeah. And then I'd be like, this is freaking gross. And so now I'm like, no, it's freaking gross. Like, so you give yourself permission to just be who you are.
Yeah.
But you have to find out who that is first. And I think that's the biggest challenge. But yeah, but
any tips for finding yourself or finding out who you are? Anything that's helped you?
Yeah, I think you need to stop telling yourself the lies that everybody tells you. Because eventually what I have found is that so many times through a bad marriage, through people in the organization, through the tactics of the organization, you are told who to be. And slowly but surely, I think inadvertently, you just start believing it. You think, it took me a long time to not believe that I left the organization because I was spiritually sick. Yeah. It took me a long time to realize, like, hell no, I was standing in my own power and I was teaching my kids to not conform to anything if it doesn't resonate with you well. And then I give myself more positive affirmations where people will say, oh, well, you walked out on your husband and you walked out on your family. I now in turn say, hell no, I am the woman who stayed in a marriage for 8 years and fought to make my kids have a good home to live in. And you know what? That takes strength. That takes power. That takes balls to be in a inauthentic life because you want your kids to not have to be in two separate homes.
That's awesome. Yeah.
So like you have to be your own cheerleader. You really do. You have to take the negative things and say, okay, if this was said about somebody else, what would you say? How could you point out a positivity? But you have to do it for yourself. When I was looking in the mirror, I'm 41. I'm like, oh my God, where the hell did this wrinkle come from? And I'm like, yeah, but I still got a good rack. Like, I mean, as blatant as that is, like, but you have to be that, like, you have to find the funny in life.
Sure.
Not to be so serious all the time, because that moment of being unhappy and like bitching and complaining about something, you can't get it back.
Nope.
So you just got to remember, like, it's okay to have the woes and the bad days or whatever, but just don't live in it,
Yeah, you just have to have them with perspective.
Yeah, that's why I have a half-hour mark. Like, be pissed off for that half hour, but girl, you're going to get over it, and you're going to pick up your shoes and you're going to move forward.
Yeah.
So, but I mean, there's nothing better than learning to be your own best friend. And I know that that's so cliche and it sounds so corny and so many people
that's awesome.
say it, but until you actually put it into practice, there's just nothing better. And one of the things that I find so funny is so many of their tactics that they use are life tactics that you can put into positivity. Just like you were trying so hard for all those years to make Jehovah your best friend. Use those same tactics, but use it on yourself.
Yeah.
And, obviously they use these tactics for such malice and bad things for people, but the formula's good.
Yeah.
It's just used in such a negative way.
Yeah.
So just try to find the things that work for you, I guess, and just, I don't know, kick ass in life,
Yeah.
Life is so short,
I love that. Kick ass in life. I think that's a good way to end it. Kick ass in life.
Yeah, definitely.
I want to thank Corrie for being so open about her life, and it's so cool to be able to interview both her and Nico and tell their stories. Who knows? Maybe someday there's somebody else out there in the family who comes out with a story to tell. So I know she holds out that hope of possibly seeing someone else leave, and we'd all rejoice with her. If you want to leave a message of support for Corrie, to get resources mentioned in the episode, donate to the show, reach out for therapeutic and life-changing personal coaching, find out when the next Shunned Recovery Project group is, or just buy a t-shirt, go to shunnedpodcast.com and it's all there. You can probably get a lot of it right from your podcast app in the description. Thank you to everybody that makes this happen financially by showing support for this work. If it's something that you appreciate, please consider making a donation at patreon.com/shunned. Thank you to everybody that leaves 5-star reviews on iTunes for Shunned and This JW Life. It really helps. And okay, 2 quick announcements. Well, I don't know how quick, but 2 announcements. One, if you're in the New York City area, I'll be speaking as part of a panel on a long day of speakers at the When Rights and Religions Collide conference. There will be people speaking on a variety of topics and people from other high control religious groups as well. You know, we as ex-witnesses often say that we want more representation in the media and such. I think it would help if we really brought a good number of people. You know, this is our chance to kind of be seen. I may only get to speak for a short time myself, but we can all make our presence felt, and it's likely that there's going to be some media attention for this. You know, New York City was the world headquarters right there in Brooklyn, so there's got to be a lot of former, witnesses there. So if that's you, please help spread the word. Let's see if we can get people to this conference and really show out. The conference is on Saturday, October the 19th. You can get more information and tickets at rightsandreligions.com. Also, along with that conference on Saturday, I want to organize a meetup on Sunday, October the 20th. So if you've listened to the sound of my voice through your headphones, now you can meet me and hear it come out of my head. Here's the deal, though. I don't live in New York City. I have some contacts up there that are willing to try to support this, maybe make some suggestions on getting a place we can meet up. I might even have a musical artist willing to perform for us. But I need to know how many us is. And I need to know that people are actually going to show up. You know, New York's not a easy place to just get together and hang out for a group. So, please don't say that you're going to come if you aren't going to take it seriously. You know, we don't want to get someplace for 50 people and then 10 show up. I know people get excited about an idea and want to participate, but please don't sign up if you don't really think that you're going to be able to follow through. You only make it harder on us to plan for a larger group for no reason. I understand if something legit comes up last minute, but sometimes trying to get us ex-Jehovah's Witnesses together is like herding cats. Everybody's interested, and then when the time comes, people forget and kind of go their separate ways. So if you want to come to the event, I have an event posted on Facebook called Shunned Podcast New York City Meetup. So again, it's Shunned Podcast New York City Meetup. So that way you can find it. This is going to be my hub for planning this and for figuring out who's coming. If you're not on Facebook and want to come, you can email me through the contact form on shunnedpodcast.com. But let's face it, most people are on Facebook at this point. It's going to make it a lot easier just to do it on the event page. All right. And the second announcement that I had is that the Shunned Recovery Project groups that I mentioned last episode are going well. I'm running 2 each week. And if you want to join in and video chat with other ex-J-Dubs, or I'm open to people from other groups as well, go to shunnedrecoveryproject.com to go directly to the page for it, or find it on shunnedpodcast.com. There's a page for it there as well. I put up the days and times for the week on that page at the beginning of the week. I try to do one weekday night around 7 p.m. for those on the East Coast and others. And I do one on either a Friday or Saturday night around 9 p.m. for those on the West Coast. And then any of my Australian listeners, there's quite a few there that are pretty active. So it helps them to be able to make a meeting. But we need support, not just showing up. I also have a place to donate on that page to keep me spending my time and energy and everything putting these together and leading them 2 nights a week. We've been having productive discussions about our struggles after leaving, some of the issues that we struggled with while we were actually in the witnesses so far. I want to thank everyone that's supported by showing up or by financially showing up so far. It's been good for people, and as long as we keep up this pace of financial support, I can keep doing 2 meetings per week. If there's more support, I can do more groups for more time zones. So thank you all again for supporting what I do. I hope you'll continue or join in if you're not now. I hope to see some of you in New York City, whether at the conference or the meetup the next day. I'd love to see us apostates really represent. I've even thought about it, being fun since it's close to Halloween, to do the first really big Halloween party of ex-Jehovah's Witnesses on that day, but that might be a little too much. It's just an idea. Anyway, the music for the podcast is, as always, No Hell Yet by Fair Voyeur. And until I see you next time, love others, do no harm, and go be happy.
We'll curse God